This is scene 2, introduction to the police. And again, multiple shots, multiple mini scenes, but the purpose of this scene is to give us a background to the police and how they're working, what kind of evidence they're getting against OJ, and really we're going to see some of the main characters of the cops here. So Jody, let's start this. Do you want to walk us through, please?
Sure. So the first thing that happens is we see OJ and he's late for a limo that's waiting for him. And we don't really learn too much about OJ in this because it's just a little snippet. But what is interesting is you do see the limo driver's stardom with OJ. The celebrity is like, I've never picked up a celebrity before. And I thought it was really interesting, OJ saying that, when he was little, he wanted to grow up and be Willie Mays, so, and he looks like something is weighing on him heavily. So he's late, something's weighing on him. Your mind kind of starts to take off a little bit there. Do you have anything that you got from the limo?
No.
Kind of short and sweet there a little bit.
Perfect.
So then we have a man walking his dog. Very nice neighborhood, very quiet neighborhood. Everything's like immaculate. I don't live in that type of neighborhood. I'm not sure about you, but it looks like it has a lot of money. And they just, with the dog and everything, they discover 2 bodies, and not just a body, but like a brutally murdered body. And the man is completely taken aback. You can tell that this isn't, old hat in this neighborhood, something that happens every day. He's like completely shocked.
Yeah, I got a feeling that probably the biggest crime in that neighborhood is a parking ticket. So it's kind of foreshadowing in a sense. It's such a brutal crime in such an affluent neighborhood that's foreshadowing this whole crime to the nation.
Yes, I totally agree. So then we go in the house, and the cops come. Looks like a uniform beat cop responding to a call here, and he is clearly searching for a suspect. The way he is maneuvering through the house, and it's very suspenseful. You get that as the viewer, and you see candles in the living room, and he's going through the house, and you see him open the doors to not 1 but 2 children's bedrooms, and it's like, oh my gosh, the kids are still in the house, and there's 2 dead bodies outside. So you can tell that he is even ramped up now with looking for the suspect because there's people still alive in the house. And then he gets to the bathroom where there's a tub with candles. It's very serene like that. Mom's going to have a relaxing long day bathtub. And he kind of stops. And it hits him and it hits you. The whole emotions of what's going on here. That not only has 2 people been brutally murdered, but one of them's a mom and the kids are still inside.
Yeah, half bowl of ice cream, and it's halfway melted. So she was just there. It is a fresh active crime scene. So this is a really important point here because you and I a couple of days ago were discussing this, and to me it was fascinating the 2 different ways you and I perceive this. You said it. You mentioned the emotion, the human element to this. When I watched it, I was like, okay, the kids are there, ice cream's there. Okay, the crime is out there. I didn't connect it, but you did. And to me, that was a learning lesson for me because I'm always mission oriented. Just keep driving on. And sometimes I leave that human element out of it. And I never realized that until just talking to you about that scene. And so now, just personally, when I'm very conscious now when I talk to people, especially clients or when people, whomever I'm supporting, I'm really trying to make sure that I take in the human element. I really have to because it's so powerful and it's so true. It's just something I've ignored. So just watching the show with you has actually helped me enlighten myself. So for you, the viewer out there, make sure this is a great lesson. If you're mission oriented, you may ignore it, but if you're people oriented, you really focus on it. Make sure you take both. If you take both, you have a good picture, I think. So sorry, I interrupted.
A nice balance. No, it's a nice balance of behaviors. You cannot really execute a mission without people, and you cannot be so focused on people that you forget the mission. So it is a hugely important lesson that I've seen. I don't know. I'm probably over exaggerating 1 million times in corporate America that people, when they get very focused on something, their natural behaviors come out. And if they are one side or the other, they forget the other piece and it really affects the outcome that they're trying to do. So this is a huge lesson
Yeah.
from this series.
Yeah. So from that, then we go into another scene where we're introduced to one of the major players in this trial and this show, and that player is Detective Mark Furman. Now, if you're watching this and you know who he is, I would tell you scrub away what you know of him. Watch the character in the show, because that's what you're really focusing and evaluating, this character. So when I watched him, this is how I saw it. I'm playing detective too. I'm not making any conclusions about people. I'm just taking in the evidence. So when I saw him, I saw a person who is extraordinarily professional. He comes into the crime scene, starts reviewing all the evidence, and you can see it's by the numbers. He makes a point saying this is not a robbery. So he is putting the case, this crime scene. He's making the case right now, deducing, process of elimination. He is focused like a laser beam on what's in front of him. So that was my perception. What was your perception of him?
When I first watched this, I kind of felt he was very cold and desensitized, and, I might even go as far as saying like he's kind of a little bit of a jerk with everything that is emotionally going on, especially after all this that we talked about, the kids and whatnot. But we talked a couple days ago, and I rewatched the scene. And when I rewatched it, I saw it from your point of view, and I looked at it through a different lens. And what I saw when I watched it the second time is what you're saying, but even more granular. He is on task. He is in the minutia detail of what's going on. He is listening to the police officer point out everything that they have found for evidence, and then he is processing it out loud, probably for the benefit of the viewer, but processing it out loud of, okay, here's the evidence. What does it mean? Bowl of ice cream is undisturbed. It's not a robbery. This is an active crime scene. He is like, you can almost see his wheels spinning. So by going back and watching it after talking to you, I saw it through a different lens. He's not being a jerk. He's just so ingrained in his task and his job. He is not letting any of the emotions affect him. And he's just getting right down to what needs to be done, the mission per se.
And I think, and it's funny you're saying this, I think especially when you watch the show, when we get more further episodes in,
mm-hmm.
if there's anything about that character at that point in time, there's no bias. This is an empty slate.
Mm-hmm.
This is a crime, and he literally is playing the process of elimination. We got this,
Yes.
Not that, not this. He's moving forward. I think it's important
Mm-hmm.
to note as we go further and we start hearing some of the defense against him. So he's all business. And watching that, he's professional, all business. But then something happens. It's kicked upstairs, which means this is above your pay grade. And
yes.
They bring in these other two detectives, and those detectives are Van Atter and Lang.
Mm-hmm.
We see these guys, and these gentlemen are a little different from Furman.
I would almost go as far as saying extremely different rewatching this. And I know, how could I possibly be getting more out of this on like time 11? But trust me, you do. So we're watching it again. They come in, the big shots where the detective's taking over. I mean, is this not in every kind of movie or show in the history of shows that someone comes in, the big guy taking over? And the things out of their mouth while Furman is going through all this evidence stuff is, where are the kids? Have you identified that man? And has anybody notified OJ? They are 100% about the people, and like nothing about the task, nothing about the details. They are more about what is happening with the people in the scenario, which was kind of interesting because Furman did not bring up any of those questions about the people.
So I would say this. So that's an interesting view. Now, I'll bring a different point of view to this, in the sense that when it's kicked upstairs, these guys are, if Furman basically is the manager on the ground in the nitty gritty, doing the tactics, putting the pieces together, I think these guys are, this is probably the wrong word, more executive level. They're seeing the big picture. The big picture, it requires making the case. But the big picture also requires identification. Who are we talking about? And have you notified the next of kin? This is, to me, that's the big hole. So when they come in, they're not interested in the tactics. They're like, what's the big thing here, the big thing here, big thing here? And by the way, give me your details later. That's how I focus. That's how I saw them from the mission-oriented behavior.
I definitely see that too, because they do mention the media. You know, they're worried about getting in front of the media, because it's like, you know, I think it's Furman says, well, the media's not here now. And they're like, they will be. So I see them seeing the big picture, but it's just interesting that it's like one side of the big picture, not the other side. So I like both our perspectives. I think it's like two halves of the puzzle, well, quite honestly.
No, I totally agree. And it's funny because it really shows you, I think, again, we're taking this little sliver of maybe a minute or two, and we're really dissecting. It's really showing the two sides of police work. One is the nitty gritty, getting the facts and the detail. The other is the perception, the big picture, you know, identifying the victims, identifying next of kin, but also managing the press. That's probably something you don't learn in the police academy, is how to manage the publicity. But what does that tell you about the area, right? This is Brentwood. This is like, a Beverly Hills. You can tell that there's almost two sides of the police. There's the detailed side, nitty gritty, and there's the other high end, manipulate the perception, the optics.
I think that's a great point, and I would go even one step further, that I don't think it's just necessarily the two sides of police work. I think that happens in every job everywhere. You have some people that are doing the tasks and are very deep dived into the details. And then you have other people, the leaders per se, the management, things like that, that are trying to oversee what's going on with the details and making sure that runs smoothly, but then dealing with all the bosses that are on the other side. So, you know, you're kind of stuck in between. So I think there's a lot of parallels in this series, even though, how does a show about a double homicide and a celebrity equate to everyday life with your job? Not particularly sure, but it does every time. There is like a lot of parallel of examples that you can draw from it. And it is exceptionally funny, but just that right there. You know, if you talked to, people in corporate America, like your job is mimicking what we're seeing with police in episode 1 of OJ, they'd be like, you are crazy. Well, we're not crazy. You can draw a lot of lessons through something like this, that you live every day. And It's like epiphany moments like you and I are having as we talk through this. So it's fantastic.
And every time we do this, it's always a new epiphany. We've done this so many times, and every time we watch it, a new epiphany. So this is fantastic. Okay, so what's next? Oh, so now we've met the cops. Now we meet another character, right?
Well, we got to go to OJ's house, because now it's like we got to notify OJ. So, and tidbit, very interesting, possibly foreshadowing, Furman knows where OJ lives because he went to a domestic dispute there. Food for thought. But he, and he obviously doesn't really know these other detectives because they have to introduce each other. But now they've all of a sudden, in about 3 seconds, become their own little detective unit, and off they go to OJ's house, which they continue to show the same behaviors that we just talked about. The two, Van Adder and Lang, are pressing the button, the lights are on, cars are here, someone's home, we got to get in there. And Furman's like, I'll be back. And he goes to start looking for the evidence. So even though the situation has changed, even though the place they're at has changed, they're continuing to do those same behaviors that we originally saw, which I think is fascinating.
It's great writing.
Fascinating.
It's really, that's a sign of a great script, I think. The characters are consistent and it makes sense. Yep. So Furman jumps over. They go to OJ's house. What's next? What happens next?
Well, we meet Kato Kalin, which, I don't necessarily know if he brings a lot to the series besides almost comic relief. So it's worth talking about. I particularly like how the cops are talking to them, and we do lose a little bit of the people part of the two detectives because they get very frustrated with them very fast because he is just and no idea what they're talking about all over the place. But basically, they look around the house, and they call OJ. They got to notify OJ what's going on. And this, I thought, and I definitely want your perspective on this, was like a pivotal moment in episode 1. That you have one of the police detectives that was very people oriented or big picture, and he calls OJ and he talks to OJ, and he's saying your ex-wife was killed, and is she dead, and they go through it, and I'm coming back, and blah blah blah. And when he gets off the phone, he turns to the other detective and he says he didn't ask how she died. And I wonder if Furman had made that phone call, would he have made that observation? Because that's a very people observation, very emotional observation. It is evidence, but not really, like soft evidence, not these hard facts. So it was, the police are making an observation based on how OJ is acting, which I thought was very fascinating.
Yeah. I mean, that's, I don't know if you would call it evidence. I'm not sure what they would call it, but the fact is how he responds would be very suggestive, because I believe in a murder. Again, I'm not a police officer, but usually in murders, it's usually not next to kin, but it's a relative who usually kills you. Something to that effect. And it's not what he said, it's what he didn't say.
Correct. Yes.
And these cops, I'm assuming, since they're old, they have gray hair. They've done this many a time, and the fact that he didn't have your traditional people going, crazy. It's like interrogations. You ever watch those shows about interrogations, and usually an innocent man or woman who's accused of a crime, they'll start screaming, "What are you talking about? No!" If the person who stays silent, they're like, "Oh boy, he's got guilty written all over his face." Doesn't prove anything, but it leads them. How Furman would act to it, I have no clue. He may not have the political skills of Van Adder, or I think Lang makes the call. But it's hugely suggestive that they already are being directed toward a potential suspect just from that phone call.